Welcome. It's great to be back at Øredev. I was here 2019 and I really loved it. I still have my water bottle from 3 years ago. It was a little bit bigger. Now we downsized, simplified, made small, I learned in the keynote today. So we're moving in the right direction. My name is Simon and I want to talk about my story of full-time remote ensemble programming, or it's also known as mob programming. I want to take you on that story. But what is ensemble programming? It's, well, originally defined as mob programming, but the community moved more towards a more inclusive word with ensemble. So we probably use two terms in the talk, but I try to focus on the ensemble programming part. But the concept was initially coined by Woody Sewell as a way of working, namely all the brilliant people working at the same thing, at the same time, at the same space, on the same computer. And well, I did remote ensemble programming. That means, well, instead of the same space, we were at the same virtual space and on the same shared screen instead of the same computer. And I did this a while, and after 1 year, I reflected on the project I did. And I posted this tweet after 1 year of doing full-time remote ensemble programming. And I realized, okay, I had 1 year without a daily stand-up, 1 year without any of these waiting for reviews on a pull request, 1 year without handovers before the holiday that you normally do. And for me personally, 1 year where I worked from home, but I didn't feel alone. I felt part of a great team. And for me, I decided after this year, I don't want to work differently anymore. And then the time continued, and well, 3.5 years passed, and I can still say, I don't want to work differently anymore. And I want to show you what is remote ensemble programming. And for that, I take you back to 2018. So in 2018, I just finished my PhD at university and tried to build a startup, which failed, as most startups do. And what you do then is basically join a consultancy company to earn some money after this failed startup. So I joined InnoQ, and after a few weeks, months of idle time, or some internal things, I got my first project assigned with people I've never worked before. And we traveled to the customer, and we had 2 weeks at the customer on site to kind of define the project, a kickoff 2-week sprint, I would say. And there we did all the things that you normally do. We tried to understand what's the domain. We tried to define the bounded contexts, speaking of domain-driven design, so defining what you want to do. You define the architecture, select some technologies. And at some point, we said, okay, let's start. Let's really produce some code, some lines of code. I've learned that's the metric to listen now. So we wanted to produce some line of code. And the thing was that our team was quite different in the background. So I had a very academic background. A colleague of mine had no academic background, but a lot of experience in integrating software systems. And another colleague of mine had a lot of consulting experience. And we wanted to make sure that our first service we built doesn't look like it's built by 3 different people, and then when you go into that file, it's completely different when you go there. We want to have a common standard, and that's why we thought, okay, let's try to build the first service together so we can learn from each other. And that's how it started. And we basically did ensemble programming at the customers, having a beamer projecting on the wall and sitting around and just hacking away, producing those awesome lines of code. And then the time came where we went home. And we were distributed all over Germany. And InnoQ doesn't have, like the company I'm working for, doesn't have an office where we lived. So basically, everybody said we want to work from home. But we said, okay, we started this first service together. We want to continue finishing this service together. But we were now working at home. So we transferred all the things from ensemble programming to remote ensemble programming, and then well, continued working on the first service, and then on the second, and on the third, and kept on going. And it's basically, we stuck with that way of working. A disclaimer here, so I don't just talk about remote ensemble programming, I talk about the extreme form of remote ensemble programming, which means full-time remote ensemble programming. That's the default way. 80–90% of my time I worked with that method for 3.5 years. And this changes a lot of things when you do it full-time. And I want to show you how a normal day looks like from my perspective. So as always, a day starts with a good cup of coffee. I brew it in my kitchen, and then take it with me upstairs to my home office room. Here, a screenshot of how it looks. Two things that are very important for me was that I have this microphone standing there, so I don't have to wear a headset all day. Because, as I said, full-time remote ensemble programming. And when you have to wear a headset full-time is something I don't like. Another interesting thing is when you work full-time in your home office, it's always a good idea to have a CO2 sensor. This is a small white thing here to measure the CO2 level. It currently is on the yellow, so you have to open your window in probably a few minutes. And then, at some point, you read some email, you check Twitter, what you do normally in the morning. And we all agreed to always meet at 9 a.m. to start the day together. But sometimes you're early, and so you log in your virtual team room, which was a Zoom room only made available. It's like a personal Zoom room, which is always open, and you can just join. In this case, I joined and was the first person in there. It's a little bit lonely. But then, a few minutes later, my colleague Jochen arrived, who's also a speaker here at Øredev, talking tomorrow. And then we talked about some small talk things, the water cooler things that you normally have. Then our product owner arrives and talks about his favorite football team and why it lost undeservedly yesterday or something like that. And then another colleague joined, then the product owner leaves, other colleague joins. And at some point you say, okay, let's start working. And then someone shared their screen. You pick something up, you decide, let's code something, let's do something. And, well, basically that is how my screen looked like 8 hours a day for 3.5 years. So I have someone sharing their screen in the middle and all the other people on the right-hand side. And yeah, this is for a very, very long time. We agreed on a few rules that were very important for us in this way of working. One thing was, in our small group of people where we have created for us a small safe space, so to say, it was very important to always have the camera on. We wanted to get all this non-verbal communication that we rely on in normal life as well on the remote part. For us, it was really having a virtual team room, feeling like being in the room with our colleagues, where we shared more time probably than with our partners, because 8 hours a day for every work day for 3.5 years, that's a lot of time. The position of the camera was important as well, because we wanted to communicate on eye level. And when you look on the left side, it's not eye level, it's faced from the side. It's when you have the camera only on your laptop, and the laptop is right next to your external monitor. Classic setup. Not so good. The second one is when you only have your laptop, no external monitor, and you look downwards to the camera. And that means you look also downwards on the others. You feel looked down upon. That's suboptimal. And the last thing is when you have your external camera on the top of the external monitor. And that's what we try to do. Also, we try to have like one screen in front of us, where when we look at that, we are attentive. And when you have a second screen, we put it next to it. So when we look at the second screen, we don't look into the camera, and people know we are distracted reading Twitter or something. Another aspect was screen sharing. We use screen sharing to focus everybody in this ensemble on the same thing, on the same artifact that we want to improve. And that's why we are great fans of the screen sharing, because this enables us. When we use other tooling that enable, like, where you can code in parallel and everybody can look at different things, it's much harder to get this focus on the same thing that we want to improve. And to work this way, we need some rules. Because, and you might have noticed when you had it during the pandemic and everybody went remote, the person sharing the screen has a lot of power. The person sharing the screen can do whatever they like, and you have to watch it. And we'd want to try to reverse that power to the people, we could say. So the person sharing the screen is reduced to a reactive, high-level interface, the typist, whereas the others get the power to say what the typist should do. And this forces the typist to go slow. So the typist can't just click around and do something on their own. It should really have to do what the others tell. And this allows all the others to really only think in the problem space and in the solution space on a higher level. Because the low-level solution space we can put to the typist. We have a very high-level API to work with. And this is not easy to do. You have to learn to work like that. And we have some tips here on the notes if you how to act. But it's really a learning process, and it's not easy, especially for senior people, senior engineers who they have often a very hard time to be the typist, to hold still and follow instructions they might not agree with at the moment. Another thing is, when you work like that, it's very important to rotate the person sharing the screen. So what we did, we rotated every 10 minutes. So and the idea behind that is, when you share the screen, you are active. And you are reactive, but you do something. You get instructions, you are engaged. But if you have a lot of people not sharing the screen, someone might be active discussing with others, but others might also be passive. And to ensure that everybody stays active, you may have to ensure that they know, okay, in half an hour, it's my next turn to share the screen. So they don't tend to Twitter. And so we have this rule of thumb, and for us it works with the 10 minutes. And because we use screen sharing, we have to hand over the current working state after these 10 minutes. It's because when I'm the typist and I code something, then I have to hand it over what I coded to the next person. And we use Git for that. So what we did is basically create a temporary Git branch and just push work in progress commits on that branch to sync. And at the end, we squash everything and back to the main branch. And we started out with that, and it was very cumbersome because a lot of, okay, we know a little bit of Git. We started out to maybe try a little bit of scripting to make it easier. But in the end, well, what does an engineer do when you have to manually do stuff? We automate. And that's why we built a small tool to handle that. It's called Mob. It's open source, has a lot of users. This is an old screenshot. It was even mentioned in the ThoughtWorks technology radar in October last year. And with this tool, you can hand over your code within less than 10 seconds. And this is really fast. And I want to show you how this tool works. So let's assume Martina is the first person sharing the screen, first person that is the typist, opens her IDE and her console and just enters mob start 10 into the command line. And this means she starts a new 10-minute timer, that's why the 10. And it will automatically create this temporary branch on her machine and push it to the remote. But it's an empty push, it's just creating the temporary branch also on the remote. Then we give the others give Martina instructions to work on. She types stuff in her IDE, and then at some point the machine says mob next, because the 10-minute timer triggers the signal. And then Martina immediately enters mob next on the command line, and this will create a temporary Git commit and push it to the remote. Now we have to have the handover. We already have the changes in Git, but Martina is still sharing her screen. So what's next? Carola is the next person and steals the screen share from Martina. And then, when after she stole the screen share, she enters mob start 10, and at that instant, when this command runs successful, she can act as a typist. And in the perfect handover, Martina and Carola don't have to talk to each other. It's just typing mob next, screen share stealing, mob start, and the handover is done. And you can do that very, very quickly when you are trained. And then, well, Carola does the same, mob next. Next person is Maria, my second daughter. And we do a mob start again, type some stuff. And, well, at some point we are done. And for that, we use a done command. It squashes all the temporary commits, put them in the staging area of the main branch, and from there we can simply commit and push. And now we're done. And we can even assign a commit message. And another cool feature is in the Git commit, the tool automatically collected all the authors of all the commits and put them as co-authors in the commit template. So if you do it like this, you can automatically add the attribution of all the authors. And then you can start all over. When we work, sometimes we come to a roadblock, to a wall. We don't know how to continue further. We know how to code, but in the story there we have questions. And this also happens a lot when you code, because we don't define everything up front and know the story is not so long and has every detail. So sometime we need to clarification from business, from the product owner. And for that we invented the product owner signal. It's like the bad signal, but a little bit better. It's more automated. So basically we had a small website and we pressed the button, and then it sent a message into the chat system to mentioning our product owner and sending the link to jump directly into our Zoom session. And with that, we could even measure the time to product owner because metrics are great. And yeah, it worked really well. And especially when you think about when you have 4 or 5 engineers being blocked and waiting, you put a lot of pressure on the business people to come quickly because they know how costly it is and they understand the money behind that. So yeah, that worked really well. But software development is more than coding and clarifying business stuff. We do more things. And we did all those things together as a team. From designing conceptual work in the Miro board, for instance, or writing up architecture decision records, or writing emails, writing answers in the chat system, doing analytics on our own data together with business, and even creating alertings for our systems that we own and where we had on-call duty as well. So we really did everything together. And at some point we have it's so-called Feierabend, a German word for it's now end of business and we can go home and celebrate. And before we did that, we made a check-in. So we basically wrote up what we experienced today, what came to our mind, what we are annoyed about, or what we really liked, what we learned, anything that come to mind, and put it in a public chat channel at the company. And this was very helpful to get the trust, because when you work like that, a lot of people don't trust you. They don't give you a trust in advance because it sounds strange, sounds losing money here, it's not the usual way of working. And with that, we gave them a pulse of how we work. We gave them transparency. We showed them progress, and that helped a lot. Also, this created some water cooler effects that people also try to emulate in the remote environment, because when you wrote something and people read it, it can happen that the people then say, you want to go live with this feature tomorrow, time-based. Let's step back a bit. When you really want to do this, we will have a huge issue in production, and this happened. And in our case, and other teams really helped us to prevent this error. So a lot of water cooler effects where people randomly meet and then talk about things, and then you fix something or have some insight can happen with that. And then, well, you just close your laptop at 5 p.m. and dine with your family. And that was basically a day in my team. And yeah, full-time remote ensemble programming for 3.5 years. And working this way has consequences. A lot of things change when you work that way. One thing, you have to work at the same time. And this is interesting because when people say they work remote or they work from home, they typically associate with, I can choose my own hours. I can say, I want to work, I don't know, this and then and that. But with this method, you have to align your work hours as much as possible to get the most out of it. And so we said, we start at 9, we try to get finished at 5. Classic work schedule, could be said a little bit backwards, not flexible. We even have the same lunch hour. We try to do that. And for us, it made sense. For us, it was the right trade-off because we enjoyed the benefits, so we gave up a little bit of our flexibility. Might be different for you, but for us, it really worked very, very well. Other consequence is that this only works for a small team. At the beginning, we were 3 developers. So at some point, we were 8. So we grew, and then at the moment, it's 4 again. And we realized the best amount of people is 4. And the more you have, the more exponentially worse it gets. Because of because when everybody is in the same Zoom room, only one person can talk, and then the more people you have, the smaller your time slice gets, and you don't feel engaged. So for instance, when we were 8 people, we had basically a team split. So in the morning, we said, what's the most important story, or the most important things? That's where at least 4 people were assigned, and the rest formed another team. Could be 1 person, could be 2, 3, 4, depending on how many were there, and they did other stuff. That's how we organized. Another thing is, we learned a lot from this. I came from university. I didn't have a clue how to build a system that runs in production. So this production part were never discussed, and I learned a lot. So from my perspective, it was like a learning highway. And it's not just learning how to build a system in production. It was also looking into the thoughts of experienced consultants, experienced senior engineers, because in this way of working, to explain everything you do, you have to say why you do it for everything. And that's, for me, it was an awesome experience, a humbling experience to learn. Another thing I want to say is about onboarding, because onboarding is usually a huge issue in companies. For us, onboarding took 1 day. So in this day, in the morning, the new person in the morning shares their screen, and at that time, the whole team helps this new person get everything up and running with the goal that at the end of the day, this person makes a commit that lands in production. And then everything is set up. And then the next day, they simply are part of the ensemble. They're simply part of the team and part of the rotation. Okay, to be honest, they didn't really, like on day 2, they didn't join the on-call rotation, obviously. But still, I think interesting insight. But why do we do it? What's the cool thing when you work that way? For me, it was this constant momentum feeling. I always try to explain it being on a train. So you have a train, you load a story onto it, all the people that you need on the story, and then the train keeps moving. And while the train keeps moving, people can jump off the train, other people can jump on the train. Some people have a looking glass and look out for obstacles. But the train always moves on. Might not be an ICE fast train, might be a slow train, but the important thing is it continues on regardless. And then at some point it's done. We arrived at the destination, the ticket is done. We can immediately take the next thing and keep on going. We are never blocked. That's kind of the idea. The train never stops. And this is extremely exhausting when you do that. So burnout was a problem at some point, to be honest. And we introduced very strict breaks because this is really an intense way of working. Another aspect is because it's so an intense way of working, any dysfunction of a team is will immediately escalate because you work so close together. It's like when you know it from family or partners when everybody is crowded around Christmas, like people come together and there's some issue with some people, it can quickly break out if you force people in a room together. And it's the same thing. We are forced in a virtual room. And what we did to fight this, we did retrospectives basically every day, on demand, whenever we thought. We reflected, we tried to clear up any problems as quickly as possible. And sometimes we had facilitated retrospectives as well, but these we basically did in person, came together one month or every other month. So to discuss other or more sensitive things where you need to come in person. And why is this so great? From my point of view, it's this. Normally, when you work alone and you stumble upon a thing you don't like, something is not automated or the build pipeline takes a little bit longer, it doesn't affect you too much. You're a little bit annoyed, but you don't act. Because it's not, you would have to first get the agreement of the team, you have to fight for it to get time to make this. And with this ensemble way of working, you suffer together. When 5 people watch this pipeline, continuous deployment pipeline or whatever you have, and this takes, 10 minutes, this is extremely annoying. And when you do that a few times, you immediately see, hey, can we make that better? And with that, you have this continuous improvement. You suffer all these problems together. Could be processes, could be that in your company, the product owner has to say, yeah, this feature can now go live. And when you suffer together and then you say, let's fix this and speak with one voice, you have a lot of power to improve. And this is, and when you improve a little bit every time, this really makes an effort after a few months and years. And Woody Sewell, the founder of this concept, basically said, it turns up the good. And I like this way, this Kaizen idea of continuous improvement. But from the consequences, there's also consequences for the developers, for the team, but we asked our product owner, who was a fan, at the beginning he wasn't a fan, but then he became a fan of this method, what's in it for you? And he told us three aspects what was important for him. The first one was the quality. With this way of working, you basically have very, very little bugs because everything you do is written by 4 engineers together. 4 brilliant minds that focus all the energy to build it in the right way with all the edge cases covered. And what this means for the product owner, when you don't have bugs, you can focus more on features. And that was the first one. The second one is for him that everyone was an expert, because we did every story together. And when he had a question, what's the state of the story, wanted to know something, or wanted to take someone from us to another meeting, well, everybody could answer those questions. He was much more flexible in his making appointments, because it didn't matter really which person went with him. It's also, it decreases the risk. When everyone is an expert, you don't rely on anyone. And you don't have to rehire them back because you fired them for $8 more per month or so. But the last one, the important one, was the time to market. And we heard it today in the keynote, this get the value faster, get to production faster. And mob program basically optimizes for that. It says, here's the train, this is the feature or the large thing. When we get that to production, we get value, and then go. It's always time for this feature. And this is when you think about that, the product owner can say, okay, let's put this feature in production, this story, and then the team says, okay, we are now working on it, and 3 days later it's in production with basically 0 bugs, producing value. And this is a great power. It's also when you say you have dependencies between teams, you can immediately say, okay, let's focus on the stories so other teams are unblocked. We can say we immediately do this and get a prototype or a mocked service interface in 1 or 2 days out in the quality that's sufficient. No waiting time, just everybody on the train and get it into production. But, well, the question, the elephant in the room, and it always comes up is this really efficient? Is this really efficient? There's no real clear answer to that. It's really hard. I can try to answer it with from Alan Kelly's keynote. Well, you get value faster to the customer. Is it worth it? But still, very hard to argue when they say, is this really efficient? But because they keep continuing asking this question. And then, okay, let's try. Then you can say, maybe learning is it. Maybe it's learning, because knowledge is so important, and distributing the knowledge. So people say we are a learning organization and say this is the most important thing. Maybe this is the answer. And still, it's very hard to convince people to do that just because of the learning. I tried to answer it with a screenshot of this book, Implementing Lean Software Development, from the Propendiques. Because they say from lean development, there's this idea of the 7 wastes in manufacturing. When you translate these 7 wastes of manufacturing to software development, you get partially done work, extra features, relearning, handoffs, task switching, delays, and defects. And what mob programming basically does is effectively reducing those wastes. It minimizes handoffs, because you don't need any. Defects, we try to have a 0 bugs policy. Delays, we only have really delays to other teams. So when we are dependent on another team, it isn't solved by this method. But everything else, we don't have delays inside the team. We don't have any task switching, because we try to do one task at a time, get it done, get it into production, and then move on to the next task. And partially done work is also, we try to not do that because it's so expensive to pick it up again. We try to get it really finished until the end. Also, extra features are something that, because it's so expensive to work with 5 people on one thing, that extra features are very, very expensive. It's not cheap to say this junior can try to do something else, try to add another feature. You have to really prioritize, and it forces you, because it's so expensive, it forces you to prioritize, and this tends to avoid those extra features. And that's kind of my answer I try to give when someone asks me, is this really efficient? Think about the waste. Think about the wastes you have in your own team. What are you what are the wastes in your team? That would this help? I don't know. But that's kind of my answer for that. And then January 2020 came. The project ended for me. I said goodbye. Was good, 3.5 years. I still don't want to work differently. But it was time to say goodbye. We said our farewells, and they gave us, because I left with my colleague, they gave us a farewell present, and this was really special for me because this is an epos with 30 verses, and they wrote it for us, and this shows the strong team spirit that we created by spending so much time working so intensely on a purposeful project where we helped the company during crisis in the Corona crisis, where we had some impact, and the team building is so strong that they took the time to write this poem for us, and that was really, really special. And for me, this is really the team building, because I haven't mentioned that this aspect is so strong, and it solves a lot of other issues, because that's what people I hear a lot, is this team building, how to do that in a remote context. And for us, it was solved basically by this method. Now, I help teams try out this remote ensemble programming. And this is how I would close. I would urge you, say, yeah, try if you like it, try it out and see whether it works for you, whether it's something for you. Yeah. Thanks. I have some free booklets here. It says Remote Mob Programming. It's the old version. We have to reprint it at some point. You can grab it. And yeah, but I'm still here for a little bit for questions. So if you have questions, we can answer one or two. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. The question was, how do you make sure that people stay engaged? Well, that's why the rotation is so crucial. You have to rotate the person that shares the screen so that every 30 minutes shares the screen. And you have to adjust on how many people are there to make sure every 30 minutes it's their turn. If you don't do that, the chances are very high that they zoom out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Excellent question. So were we in the same level, or the question about a very junior person joining, how did that go? At the beginning, we were on the same level, 3 seniors, and we were a lot of time, and that worked extremely well. Then we were 4 seniors, 5 seniors, and we onboarded them extremely quickly. That was astonishing. At some point, we got a very junior person, and that was a little bit problematic, because what ensemble programming does really well is teach system knowledge. It's not optimal to teach the foundations. And for that, then you need another or additional time, additional learnings, other ways, basically. The foundational knowledge you have to learn by making mistakes yourself, and then get feedback, and then iterate on that. Being mentored, coached, basically. But for transferring the system knowledge, that works extremely well. Okay. Sorry, we have a question. I think you raised your hands before. Then I have a cue in my head. Okay. The question was, how do we organize breaks? So basically, we have this rule that anyone can say, I want a break now, and we have a break. That's one rule. Then you can always leave any time. You can say, you don't even have to say, I'm gone now. You can just get off if you're not the typist, and if you're not participating in the discussion, you just simply can go off. What we did is that we kept the video on, so people see, okay, this chair is empty now, and then they come back, I don't know, 20 minutes later, and we see, they're back, and we can integrate them again. Then we have also the general rule to have regular breaks, so every 60 minutes, at least 10 or 15 minutes. So all these come together to solve this break problem. Okay, do you have the same question? Okay. Yeah. Now breaks are extremely important, otherwise you burn out really quickly. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Did you find any tasks that were not really suited to work that way?
Excellent question. The question was, what tasks are not suited to work on with this method? So the one thing is when you work on the one thing is very simple tasks. We immediately say, okay, why should we work together on simple tasks, and then someone does manual stuff on the screen, and we all look at these manual tasks, and this doesn't make sense. I agree, this doesn't make sense. So there are two answers to that. First, we could automate it together, so we don't have to do this manual task. That would be the golden way. Or we say, okay, let's don't do that together and parallelize it. But this parallelized part is a little bit problematic, because sometimes when you parallelize, you realize, that it seemed a simple task, but actually it's not. And maybe the simple task introduced a bad bug, and then you can, was it worth it? I don't know. That's one thing. What's really don't work in the ensemble is if no one has a clue. Then this method does not work. So you have to solve that by either calling someone who has, like in the game shows, you call someone who has the clue, let them join the team, your session, so they can help you. Or make someone from your own team the person that then helps you by saying, okay, you for one day you learn this, and then come back and bring the knowledge. Or you say, let's learn this. Everybody learns this, like I don't know, day or 1 hour. You fork out, and then join and present your knowledge. That's the other thing. Except from that, I don't. From all these things I said, for anything else, I think we can use this method. It's more like whether the people want that, and that's a completely different topic. Everybody can decide whether they like it or not. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. The question was, how fast was the product owner? Was the time to product owner? Actually, very quickly. Normally, it joined immediately, as it was, I don't know, probably 60% of the cases. But often, also they just wrote, okay, in 45 minutes, I have a few minutes to join, and that's enough, because it's not something like you face this question and don't know what to do at all. It's more like, we don't know how to do it, but we have, I don't know, a few tests to write anyway, and that's how it works. For us, it worked really well. So this was not an issue. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, the question was that the original definition means the product owners there all the time, whereas we had the product owner on a short leash and calling him with the product owner signal. For us, having the product owner in the team or in the session the whole time was not practical because the product owner has so many meetings, has to clarify with other people. This would not have been possible. And for us, this way really worked well. So maybe we deviated a little bit from the original definition, have everybody on board, but sometimes the product owner also just joined from their own will. Say, I have now a little bit of time, just join and talk with you, maybe see what you're currently doing. We had that as well. So it was not just we call them, they also came to us and just say what's up. And so I think every team has to decide how they work, but I like this model of calling the person because it's a different way of working. The product owners plays more calendar Tetris, and we try to focus on these stories and try to avoid calendar Tetris, to keep the calendar free for only coding and producing those valuable lines of code. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent question. How do you handle egos in this? It's a very so to some part it's a very general question. How do you handle egos in a team anyway? Are they can there be an ego, a strong ego in a team? Does it work? Is it then really a team, or is it more like individuals as a group? And well, what does team mean to you? The other thing is because at the end the team or the ensemble has to move in the same direction. They have to agree we are moving on that same direction. So what we try to do is we have when we have to decide on the direction, we have to we use the strong opinions loosely held method. So we have a strong discussion, and then at some point we say, okay, now we try to lose all those strong feelings and just decide, because it doesn't matter whether we go left or right. We have to go. It has to move on. That's a key thing. But that doesn't always work. There's also this way of consent versus consensus. So it's very hard to get everybody say yes. It takes a lot of investment. We don't try to do that. We try to use to go that no one has a veto, because then you can move forward. For instance, when you sorry, I don't get an example right now, but it's kind of get the idea that when you this not, it's much easier to not say this I write my name under it, except to say I actively stop it, and we try to handle that. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, got blank. Okay. Last question. Yes, please. Okay, the question was, did we made a fuck up together as a group? To be honest, I don't recall one. It's sad, but like smaller things, yes. Like it's not that we were but very very rare. So I don't have a good story here. Sorry. But we weren't free of failure. That's for sure. But nothing really problematic. Okay, very last question. Okay, the question is whether we have any metrics comparing this way of working to the classical way of working. No, it's also very hard to compare. That makes it very hard. So yeah, it comes back to this: is it efficient? Very hard to answer. I'm sorry. Okay, thanks again, and yeah, see you around.